Hello, everybody. I'm waving my hand so you see me here. I'm going to, excuse me, this is learning about curated academic training within U.S. Census Bureau's data dissemination training program. So we do have data dissemination specialists like myself around the country. And if requested, we do come to universities or we do it virtually and help within classrooms and show how to use our data and how to download it and how to work with it and to understand it. So what I'm going to do is actually for about 20 minutes give a presentation called the life cycle of a data presentation. This is really how personally, I live near New York City, how I end up finding clients at universities who want me to do presentations. And then once I'm finished, with the presentation, I will do a quick demonstration of data.census.gov, which is our data portal. And that's often what I use in the classroom when students are learning. And then once I'm done with that, my colleague Amy Brombos, she will give her presentation and what she does with universities, which is a little bit different than myself. And we will try to answer questions that show up in the question and answer. So Amy's answering for me right now, and then I'll try to answer for her when she's presenting. So what I'm going to do here is, like I said, it's called the life cycle of a data presentation, meaning how I get the presentation and what happens. So if you can see down here at the bottom left, I've written in here, there's some initial outreach, some engagement, setting the stage is what I call it, interactive learning, and then follow-up and rapport building. So let me just move ahead. I only have a few slides here before I go into the actual website. So the first thing that I do when I'm trying to find clients who may want a census workshop or presentation is I specifically target universities in my area. So I'm, cover New Jersey and Connecticut, and I'll go looking for one or two universities and try to figure out different courses that may need census data, may be interested in that. And so I will find professors or chairs of departments, and then I will send an email that looks something like this on the right. It got a little bit corrupted here, but I send it very neatly to people, and I may, hear back from a professor straight away. It may take a while. Sometimes the professors find me. Maybe they've gone to a site we have called Ask Data, and somehow their emails are sent to me, and then I'll present to them. So I don't have any fancy links in my emails. It looks very governmental, but that's done intentionally. So once I've actually, sent the email, I may hear back from a professor. So I would call that the initial return email. And that could be, within one day, could be within 1 hour, it could be within 1 year. So sometimes I don't hear back from people for a really long time, and they may say, "Oh, are you still doing this?" And I'll say, "Yeah, we're still doing this." And so I'll work with them to, do something. So once that email comes back to me, I try to set up a phone call or a virtual call with people. And then I explain to them what we do, how I administer what I do in the classroom. These are sort of my sort of blurred vision of my cards that I keep. And as soon as I have somebody on the phone or virtually, I'm writing down notes about the way they teach the class and, what kind of students are in the class and maybe what the projects are that they're working on. So sometimes we call that a needs assessment, how much they need of certain things, what we present. And I also ask that if they want to go forward with this, that that they send me a syllabus, and so that I can figure out where I fit into that, or that the place that they want to put me in there seems to be correct within the syllabus. Sometimes the professors already have the syllabus created for the semester, but they say, no, I can do without this presentation this week. Instead, if you come in here, this will just be so much better, that sort of thing, right? So we agree whether we're going to do it virtually, in person, or how it's going to be virtually online, that sort of thing. And then we're also agreeing on the date and the time and the length of the presentation, which can kind of make it or break it sometimes. If the presentation is too short, sometimes we can't get an exercise in there or a workshop. So we try to come to a nice understanding about that and what we should do. So that's sort of the initial engagement. And then once that happens, once we have an agreement, what I'm going to do, and the professor or the chair of the department feels very comfortable with what I propose, um, a little bit before the date of the presentation and workshop in the classroom, maybe a week before, I'm going to follow up with people. And so that would be some sort of communication. It might be a phone call, it might be an email. And I'm really just trying to figure out if any plans have changed. And I'm also finding out at that point how many students are actually in the class. Maybe some students dropped out, maybe others decided this isn't for me, or maybe they have a special project within the class that they're working on. So I do try to figure that out. Some professors send me photographs of the classroom. So here's something over here, and it helps me figure out, how do I need to set up that classroom to work with the students. Okay, so, because what I'm doing might be a little bit different than what the professor is doing. I will send a copy of the presentation that I have, at least the PowerPoint. I will send that to the professor just a couple of days beforehand. And then once again, when I get there, there's still a little bit rearranging to do sometimes. So I do look at the logistics on the spot and try to figure out, okay, maybe everything looked perfect in the photo, maybe everything's good, but we need an extra extension cord or something of that sort. I don't have those problems too much anymore, but it does happen once in a while. Okay, and then once in the classroom, there's a lot of interactive learning. That's what I like. So in person, if I can get there earlier than the professor, which happens sometimes, and if the students are in the class, I will actually start talking to them and ask them, what are you trying to get from this class, or what is your major? That sort of thing. And so I say, do you have any special interest areas? So usually there might be two or three students there early, and they'll give me a little bit of information. And that really helps me get the feel for what's going on in the classroom as well. So what I start out with is the presentation of what we do at the Census Bureau. And I'm actually building up to, if I can call it, putting people on the website and letting them work, but they need to have certain parameters. They need to know, what population thresholds are and what some of the concepts are, that sort of thing, and maybe what they can or can't find, right? So over here on the right, if you can see, I've actually put some slides that I've created, and they're different things. So some courses are interested in how we ask questions on certain forms. So here are the questions up here. Others are, they want to understand the difference between maybe a survey and a census, or what are good questions or what are bad questions. And so I go into that a little bit. I don't go into it too much, but a little bit. And then over here in the bottom right, this is from a GIS class. They need to understand, what FIPS codes are and that sort of thing. And so I will add some extra slides into my presentation so they get that information. So then once I've sort of gone through all the concepts, I then go into the data portal, which is what I'm going to do after my presentation today. And I go through it a few times, maybe 3 times, and show them how to find the data, how to look for different things. And then once that's done, I'm going to have some sort of an interactive problem solving in the classroom. So that could be people, students are put into pairs or triples, and they're working on the same project. I don't want any student to be alone. I want them to, it's all very new to them, and, it's the real world. Sometimes things don't go right. So I want them to work together. So they could be work in pairs or triplets. Or we sometimes have this thing where we choose somebody from the classroom, or they volunteer and they come up to the front, and I give a problem to the audience. That person can't hear it. They have to cover their ears, and then they have to work. Everybody together in the classroom has to work through that problem. It's almost like Simon Says, where they're telling the person at the front how to do it. And I want to be honest, sometimes the professor will volunteer and say, I don't know how to get the data myself. So we'll say, okay, you can be the person up there, and we're going to do the Simon Says and work you through the problem. And it helps them to understand how to get through our data. All right, I have one more slide here. Okay, so after all this is done and I leave the classroom, I have different things happen, okay? So I do have some professors right on the spot. They say, wait a minute, let me just book you for next semester. And they'll say, can you do it this date or this time? And we sort of put in a date. So that does happen sometimes. The professor may give me feedback the next day. I usually send thank you note, email thank you note. If I did this virtually and the university is not close by in a small enough class, I will send stickers to them, like at the right here. But if I had gone that day, I'm going to leave them with these sorts of things, for the students to put on their computers. So the professor, I'll send an email, thank you, but they may give me a little bit of feedback, which is always really nice. I may get follow-up questions over the semester from the professor or the students. And then one of the nicest thing, like I said, is when the professor asks me to present again. So that does happen. And then a really nice thing is when that professor actually forwards my name and what I did in the classroom to a colleague, maybe at the same university or who teaches something similar at another university, and then they find me and they ask me, would you do this? So almost like, the handyman who comes to your house to do work, you found him by, a referral, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just show you really quickly what we call data.census.gov. So if you can see the URL up here, that's what that is. And this is the main place where we get data, or where we, disseminate data to people. It is not the only place, but like one of the main places. So I explained this website to the professor and students. I click on that, the little button, if you saw that, and I explain that all the filters come open over here on the left. And so they were all open in the beginning, and then I closed them just so you could see. As I'm going along and working through this, I am explaining things, and some of them are concepts that we already learned in the initial presentation. So, for example, 2024 right here is the data, the year of the data that we have at hand right now for American Community Survey. And then I may come up here to geographies and say, okay, well, what do you need in this classroom? What sort of information? And so as an example, sometimes I'll say, okay, well, we need county data. And I'll select county, and then I explain to them how to work through this. Okay, I say, so you come down here, and maybe we're going to look for, if I can think about New York State, I'll say, so here it is down here, New York State, all counties within New York State. So I add that to my filters. And then I explain to them, I always have to, explain and re-explain. The year is up here, and then the geographies, and the system's loading right now. So let's just wait a second, and then I'll move the filters down a little bit. And so then what I'm going to do, I say you usually have to have three things up here in your filters, right? So we have a year, we have the geographies right here, and then we can either come to topics or surveys. So we tend to go to survey, and we were learning about the American Community Survey in general, but we also learn about the decennial census as well. So it could be either of those types of data. And we've already learned about what 1 year data is versus 5 year data. So we select the 5 year data, and we've also learned about the different tables that we can find in data.census.gov. So here we have data profiles. Those are a sort of table. And I just come up here to the top and I say, okay, click on tables. And then it will give you, for every county in New York State, or whatever state you're selecting, right, or whatever area you're working with. I'm going to push that over. These are the 4 types of tables that you can get data for. And in the presentation that I would have given in the classroom, I've explained the tables and the sort of data that are in the table. But, just like always, you have to sort of reiterate things with people. And so I come down here and say, okay, well, these are the basic demographics. This is the table over here on the right. You're really window shopping, and maybe you come down here to economic characteristics. So you can sort of toggle between the different tables. And, we practice with that a little bit. I show them what to do. often I tell students, don't work on your computer, just watch me the first time, and then after that you can try. So here we have counties in New York State. It has all sorts of information. I do go through, there's all sorts of icons up here if you can see where I'm circling my cursor. And I explain how to download for people at universities. I don't know if this pop-up will come up if they need to cite data. Does this pop-up come up? Can somebody yell and say yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So citing is important for some classrooms, and we have different ways to cite, and you can just go back and forth here and click on that, and they can just, if they're using data, that makes it easy for them. But downloading, certainly, this is the pop-up, and these are different ways to download, and there's just, if you're in a GIS class or geography class, specific way to download. But the last thing I do, and I'm working at this throughout the whole class, maybe it won't be the first demonstration and maybe the second or the third, I'm actually going to what we call the mapping function. If I can find it here, maybe I missed it. Here it is, right there. And you can actually map the data. So I am trying to sort of democratize cartography here. And sometimes I will even give a quick cartography lesson, explaining, that it's supposed to be intuitive. The darker the color, the more of whatever it is there. And then I teach them, how to come up here and control their map. They can map either number or percentage. So maybe they're just mapping unemployed and they can click on that and the map will change for them. And then they can move around and they can, try to see if they have patterns anywhere. They can change things on the map. They can certainly change colors if they want to do that. So here I'll just change a color. So some people like to do that. They can control the map, whatever they want to do. They can also chart the data if they wanted to do that. I think it is over here. Let me see if I have it here. Yeah, chart. So some people will want to do that. And sometimes that's, it's an easier way to find a high or low in a county. So this is what I do in the classroom. Usually I go through it, go through it about 3 times. And sometimes the students will say, can you look for such and such? And I'll say, yeah, I'll do that. Or the professor will do that. Say, can we concentrate on this? But we always do an exercise at the end. And that's the thing. I don't want them to not touch it with their hands and not think about it. So we're always doing something like that at the end. That is the goal of what I'm doing in the class. So I will stop sharing, and any questions? And if not, Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, there have been no questions that we weren't able to answer in the Q&A so far. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that Q&A over to you. Well, hi, everybody. My colleague just showed you what's possible in the classroom with data.census.gov. I want to pull that lens back just a bit and talk about how we can use those same data and those same tools or that same tool, but for multiple purposes. Census data can certainly be student-centered and used for qualitative research and experimental design, but it's just as effective when utilized by your workforce development office and administrators like your VP of enrollment. Same data, different questions, and completely different stories, but just as impactful. My name is Dr. Amy Brambos. I am also a data dissemination specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau, and I specialize in data use in academia and with and for educators. I have spent most of my career using data to create narratives and strategic plans to solve problems and answer your most pressing questions. My background is in education. I started in the classroom. I moved into administration as a chief information officer and taught classes in data use for school improvement and strategic planning in the Graduate School of Education at Niagara University in New York. I love how data make you ask questions, especially in academia. Like, how does a 43% neighborhood poverty rate show up in 3rd grade reading scores? And what does it mean that 60% of students in one classroom have parents without a high school degree? Or how does a university attract the emerging 25 to 34-year-old adult population in need of credentials to fill employment gaps in the healthcare field in upstate New York? I'm going to describe the 4-step framework that I use to develop my presentations and trainings. And I know many other data dissemination specialists use the process similar to David's, similar to mine, and sort of sometimes in the middle. But I like to start with the real problem, the problems that are keeping you, your faculty, your staff, your administration, your students up at night, or the one that's sitting in that VP of enrollments inbox right now. Then we locate free and accessible federal data, excuse me, tools that answer those questions and show how they connect, because rarely will one single table tell the whole story. So like ACS, or American Community Survey demographic data, will connect to the LEHD, or longitudinal employment and household dynamic data, wage projections. The PSEO, or post-secondary employment outcome, will connect to enrollment decisions. So I like to show that power is in the links between data sets, and one question will lead to another data set, but not always in the same tool. Then we build narratives. The data become evidence, the evidence that's inside of the story, a number that explains why something is happening, and should ultimately make you ask another question that leads to more data, that leads to another question. The goal of every session, every workshop, every training, is that every participant leaves with a transferable skill that they can use again and again independently after this session ends. And that's the goal for every one of us, every data dissemination specialist, and everything we do. My colleague David's description on how many of us approach the classroom is exactly right, and my method really complements it, using data.census.gov, but also on the map, the Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes Explorer, Census Business Builder, BLS wage data, and more. The tools we depend on entirely depend on the questions that we're trying to answer, and really the audience that's in the room, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual, whether it's administration or whether it's, students in your classroom. So let me show you kind of what I mean. And I'm going to use a real example from work I've done with a couple different universities. So let's look at workforce development data. This is really a very relevant hot topic right now. So I want to talk specifically about data connected to WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. This topic really intersects community need, labor market reality, and federal compliance. It's relevant to social work, human services, public policy, criminal justice, business, almost every major you have on your campus. So for students, we open with a real question, the ones that they're already asking. You're graduating in 8 months. Does your region have jobs in your field? What do they pay? Who will you be serving? What are the barriers those populations are facing? We pull ACS labor force data for their target region. So that's data.census.gov plus any one of the other LEHD tools. We look at occupational projections to validate their career path. We navigate on the map, which is a tool I'm going to show you a screenshot of. We do that together and literally see where the jobs are concentrated and where the workers are commuting to and from. We connect WIOA compliance data to those real world populations that they're going to be working with in their careers. They leave with a data skill. They also leave with context for the actual job that they're going to be walking into. Now we can rotate that same storyline for faculty and administrators. So the same data sets, but a completely different question. Now we're asking, is your human services program producing graduates that the regional workforce actually needs? And are organizations that are receiving WIOA funded grants aligned with what your department is teaching? And can your students document community need for a grant? So we've got the same census tables, we've got the same data, but we've got completely different stories. One about launching a career and one about sustaining a program that's creating a real return on investment in the students that are entering that workforce. So a session built for your students can become a faculty workshop with a single pivot and framing pretty easily. Here's another example with that same pivot. For students, the question is deeply personal. Should I stay or should I go? where do people like me build a life after graduation? Again, we use ACS data, but now we're looking at migration flows. We're looking at cost of living comparisons, wage data by occupation and degree level, even age demographics to answer questions like, are people my age actually living in the city where I'm thinking of going? For administrators, we rotate the exact same data to ask, are we losing our graduates? Why does that matter? Are our programs fueling regional brain drain, or are we building a pipeline? What does the PSEO employment outcome data tell us where our our graduates are actually landing, right? The student version and the administrator version genuinely need each other here. If students are leaving the region, administrators need to understand why. And if administrators fix the problem, then students have a reason to stay. So the data tell both sides of that story. Now, due to a lack of time, we're not going to go explore each of these tools in depth, but I want to show you some screenshots of a few of them just so you have an idea of kind of what they look like. Each one of these tools can really be its own and should be its own training session or workshop, whether it's for your students or for your administrators, for your workforce development office. So you can really dive in, understand the concepts and how to use each one of them. And again, every one of these tools is free, accessible, to you. And once you explore it a little bit, pretty self-explanatory, especially this one. PSEO, or the Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes Explorer. This one, you can learn about degrees offered in your state or in your university system, what graduates are earning. And here you can see this one is looking at Illinois, and this is specific to the University of Illinois, Chicago. We're looking at 3 different degree programs here, although you could have selected any one of these down here. And this is giving us information on those with a bachelor's degree who've graduated and they're earning potential 1, 5, and 10-year post-graduation. So we have the option of selecting multiple degrees or just one. This is a general degree, or we can come down here and so we could have selected detailed degrees and looked at what kind of degrees are offered within these programs. You can also look at the overall the state average for any one of these degrees, which gets a little bit tricky because if you look at, say, New York, for example, you've got Manhattan included in there. So like that downstate New York City area versus upstate, really rural area is going to be markedly different, but that's always an interesting thing to show students as well. We can also look at this. We've got students who've graduated in the health profession field, for example, and in Illinois, and how many of them stayed in this geography, stayed in the state? And of those who did stay in that state, how many are working in that field? So here's another option, something to look at within this tool in PSEO. It gives us a tremendous amount of information, extremely valuable for universities, for administration to look at where students are going. Are they staying? Are they working in that field? And for students as well to take a look at and see what is happening or what they have the potential to do with the degrees that they're earning. This tool is called Census Business Builder, and this one does even more. This tool has an extreme variety of business, economic, and employment data. It's very interactive. It's visually stimulating. We're looking at a map. We can also download a very extensive report. Here you can learn where industries are located, how consumers are spending their money. We can compare that to academic attainment, home values, income, and more. And then on the map, and this tool I really like a lot. This one I'll use a great deal when doing most presentations that have anything to do with workforce and economics. Here, if we're looking at, let's say we just looked at post-secondary educational outcomes or employment outcomes, sorry, with graduates of a university, and they want to know then where they might be working. So we can go then within any geography and put in a NAICS code, or for this case, it would be healthcare, and find out, well, where are those jobs located? Where are they concentrated within any one geography? So here we're looking at DC, and we can see for healthcare, for each age group, what's the percentage of people working in that field and how much are they making? And then we can see here, where is that located? So we've got this here within the general Baltimore area. I guess we're looking at Maryland here, not DC. So and so they can look specifically at where those jobs are located. We can zoom in, zoom out to really get granular within these tools as well and look at these geographies. This tool also allows us to look at inflow and outflow. So we can see where people are commuting to, where they're commuting from, how many people live and work in a specific area, live and leave to go to work, or live in a different area and come into work. And then quarterly workforce indicators, another really great tool that kind of helps us create the overall narrative and get a really comprehensive view of what's happening in a workforce, in an area for that workforce. Here we can discover occupational data by industry, by a variety of variables. Again, we can locate data related to all 4 quarters by employee age, by race, by earnings, and more. We can get counts at the beginning of each quarter. You can see here we're looking at 10 quarters selected, but we can select up to 20. This group as counts, but you can make this age, race, ethnicity, income. We have many varieties of choices here. We can look at this by state, by county within a state. We have just so many choices here on how we can look at what's happening with employment in any one region by quarter using this tool. And then, of course, back to data.census.gov. And David also showed us how to look at these data by mapping it as we are here. And here we're comparing the populations that have earned a bachelor's degree by zip code, for example. So here we've got a great opportunity to take students or administrators from what kind of degrees do we offer at a university? What is the earning potential based on just this one university, 1, 5, and 10 years post-graduation. We can compare that to median wages and median earnings within that occupation by state, by county, using data.census.gov. Using on the map, we can look at what where they're working specifically within that region. And then we can also look at what the wages are by age within that region, by both age, by sex, by race, by ethnicity. We can go into Census Business Builder and break that down even further. The opportunities here are endless to really create a comprehensive view. Sorry about that. Okay. I think I missed one here, but we can use these tools and go back even further. It must have gone. But what I did want to say, and that slide seems to be missing here, was that we can use these tools to go back even further before a student even walks through your door. And I'm talking about enrollment and enrollment offices. When you're looking at, who lives in a target territory and are they college bound and how can we recruit, ACS, American Community Survey data within data.census.gov can give you age cohorts and educational attainment and household income by geography down to the zip code. So we can find out where people are moving by using migration flow data. This is going to reveal which recruitment territories are growing and which are shrinking in real time. You can find out where first-generation families with low college-going rates, who really represent your untapped pipeline are. We can find out, does your program actually mix with what your communities need from higher education using those? So even into like enrollment, recruiting, marketing, that's another area in which we can really help with your data. And what you're looking at here is just a small example of our workshop portfolio. Just a really small sampling of some of the sessions that we've designed and delivered and the range of audiences that we have served. So remember, every presentation, every workshop that we conduct is unique to the needs of the audience. And we spend time with you discussing your courses, your questions, your challenges, your projects, the hypotheses to your research, whatever the case may be, before we ever even begin designing your training or your workshop. In the data literacy category, you'll see titles like Data on a Deadline, which one of our colleagues originally built for journalism students who need to find authoritative data fast. Beyond Google, Federal Data for Real Research was originally designed for supporting faculty for faculty who want to support student research. And then From Numbers to Narratives, teaching with data storylines was specifically for faculty who wanted to sort of embed this methodology into their own teaching. And we can help with that as well. You know, how do you embed this work into your curriculum? On the workforce side, what's the workforce telling you and are you listening? Useful for university faculty and administrators. We've worked with workforce boards and nonprofits on WIOA, as I just gave you that example, on compliance narratives tied to university and community data. And for higher ed administration specifically, you'll see sessions on recruitment, brain drain, program viability, budget development, and strategic planning grounded in federal data, grant writing, title grant writing, everything you can really possibly imagine we can work with you to create. Every title you see can be adapted, it can be combined, it can be extended into a series, it can be remediated for classrooms, really extremely flexible. So here's what our engagement actually looks like. We can guest lecture in any course and any discipline, virtual or in person. And as David had said, and I've reiterated, we customized around your syllabus. Nothing is generic. Faculty and staff professional development workshops we do, half day or full day, librarian training sessions, administrator and leadership strategy sessions, multi-part series where we build skills progressively toward a defined goal, conferences, presentations, and panels. And remember, all data services, all Census data services, every guest lecture, every workshop, every training, they're all provided at no cost to your institution. So I'll close my part with this. Bring the Census Bureau dissemination specialists your hardest questions. The ones that have been sitting on your desk, the ones that are in your grant application, the ones that have been you've had in conversation with students who don't know what their degree's worth or what they should do and where they should go build their lives, how to do their research. The answers are almost always in the data, and we know where to find it, and we know how to help you use it. Our contact information is here on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us, and we'll open it up to more questions now if you have any.
Amy, I don't see any questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
Some people say they're still trying to process this.
I know a lot. We like to tell people that we really try not to feed you with a fire hose. And yet we consistently seem to do that because we get so excited about the data, about the opportunities, about what we have, and we want you to see what we have. I see wondering how building together works. One of the, I know David had sort of described, you know, he'll ask for your curriculum or for your syllabus and kind of go through your syllabus first and then come with suggestions, you know, based on your syllabus or your syllabi. Here are some strategies, I think, and some data I think that, you know, might work for you. When I work with faculty and staff, and especially with researchers, I'll ask specifically, you know, what are your hypotheses you're trying to prove or work with? What's the research that you're doing? What are the projects that you've got students working on? And or even better, what are the data that you want? What I find very interesting is people will tell me the research they're doing, and then they'll tell me the data that they want. And I can almost always think of other data that they probably would find extremely valuable. And when I suggest that to them, I almost always get this: oh, I didn't think you had that, or I didn't know that was available to me. And I think therein lies the problem. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
And we have just so much data available to you that's kind of where we become a valuable resource because we can lead you there. So it really...
Amy, yeah, she did follow up. She said, for example, if I want to put together faculty and student series differently,
Oh.
that's her question, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I can
So
answer.
yeah, if that's about this, about kind of about the same question,
Mhm.
Um, that you would want to put together a faculty and staff differently. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
What if I'm the lead at NYU in our census consortium and I would like to put together two series, one for the faculty to incorporate and teach particular strategies of students, and then another one, uh,
for navigation.
navigations. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
we do that.
So yeah, we could absolutely do that. And again, that would be like this conversation that we're having via Q&A, we would just sort of have in person, right? So you let us know what your goals and objectives are for any training, and then we would come up with some examples of what we would present, and we just kind of go back and forth. You let us know what you want, what you need, what your objectives are, what it is you're hoping to get out of it, and we will consistently, we'll come up with ideas and thoughts until you're happy with what we've got. But we work hand in hand with you to make sure we're giving you something really rigorous and valuable um, for that time
Yeah,
that you're giving
I would.
us.
I'm going to say I've had. It's nice to actually talk here, right?
Yeah.
So I've had the flip side, or well, it's not really the flip side, where I've gone to give a presentation in a classroom, and the professor let me know, half an hour before, oh, I invited some professors from other classrooms to come listen
Mhm.
to this so that they know what you do. So that happens as well. I mean, that's happened to me quite a number of times, I would say. Um, so somebody asked, are the projects you showed available to try? Is there a census page with challenges and what the solutions should look like? I don't think so. I don't know. What about you, Amy? I usually leave something with them. If they ask, I'll leave a problem or two on my PowerPoint deck or slideshow and leave that with the professor with the answers or with a QR code on there
Mhm.
that has the answer.
Yeah.
So I will do that, but I don't think we have a page to try
We
anything on.
Yeah, we don't on the census.gov website. In fact, that's something that's been requested of us pretty consistently lately, or at least of me pretty consistently lately. So when I'm coming in to do something, especially within a university setting, I like to leave you with some questions for you to try after. So we'll do things together, just like David explained, and then I'll leave you with 4 to 5 additional questions to try these. And if I know that's what you want, I'll leave with like the professor, I can leave you with all of the answers that your students can try them, or leave you with, email you the answers and choose not to open it, or leave it in a file, choose not to open it if you want to practice them yourself, whichever the case may be. Mhm.
Mm.
One of the things we've been talking about doing is creating sort of a booklet um, of exactly what you're talking about, because we've been asked this pretty frequently lately, so that we have sort of I guess like a workbook, and that's sort of in the development phase.
Um, I will say, can I say one thing? Going back to the thing about the students versus the faculty. I
Mhm.
mean, I have had I don't know how to say it, like where I've presented to the professor, like virtually say, this is what we're going to go through. So that's one way to do it if you're just dealing with one faculty member, and where the professor said, please don't show that one thing in the class. I don't want them to just, I don't want them to deal with that in the class. So we do have that as well. So the idea of presenting to professors or faculty as opposed to students is not a bad idea, because they sometimes there are different needs, there are different expectations of the data, I would
Mhm.
say. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Let me see any other questions here. I don't know what a TTT model is. Maybe a TTT model. I don't know what that is. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Oh, train the trainer. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we do that. Yes. Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you learn these tools, you are welcome to train anyone you want on them. Definitely use them, teach about them, train with them.
So one thing I would say about that is I do have um, a class I teach at a university. The professor has me come back every year, so I think I've done it 10 years in a row now. And that professor knows, can probably teach the class themselves, except sometime during the year we change our website all the time. Like little things get adjusted, and she'll come back to me and say, I can't find this anymore. And then that's when she'll say, can she doesn't she lets me give that initial training, and then she takes it from there, the next following labs that they have with the data. But things seem to change on our website a lot. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Okay, so train the trainer. Okay, any other questions? Um, I felt like I had one for, oh, Amy, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I, I explained how I find my clientele, which is not easy, but how do you find people to do this?
Very similarly, actually, although, um, and you're right, just sort of emailing different department heads or chairs, faculty, it's tough. You don't always get a response,
Yeah.
whether right away or sometimes, like you said, even a year later. Um, and so I find that sort of the best method, I guess, is getting referrals from other people that work in the university setting. So when we do a presentation, it's always nice when they invite other faculty to come and observe, because then they kind of get a sense of what we do. Um, or, other faculty will refer me to their colleagues because it was effective for their class. Same thing with administration, that, we'll be doing something on budgeting or grant writing, and that will prove really effective and a time saver. And so we'll get referred by them. But now, like for New York State, for example, today I just did a full training for the SUNY trustees for the state university system. And so all the trustees, then I'll work with different university presidents. And so I'm hopeful that will sort of trickle down there, and will mean something. I know in education, it's very common for both faculty, staff, and administrators to feel like, oh, one more thing, here's another government agency coming in and telling us that they want to come and talk to us about something. And so I know that one more thing idea is there. And, but we're not just that one more thing. We're time tested, time proven, the golden, model of data that's been around for, since 1790, and it's not going anywhere. And so, it's valid, it's reliable, it's timely, it's the statistical data that you want your students to be using, what you want for your quantitative analysis, for your research design, and once I feel like once people learn about it and learn about what we have and see what we do, then it's usually a lot of like, oh, I'm sorry I waited so long to do this. And I love doing this because, having done so much of the work that you all do, I know what a time saver it is. I know how efficient it can make your work and your life. So I really try to push it on as many people as I can. So tell your friends. That's basically our message. Any other questions about anything at all? What we can do for you, how we can
Oh,
help
I'm
you?
sorry, I was muted. I was going to say, I think we need to tell the audience where we are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, I'm near New York City, so I did see somebody from NYU there, but I'm in northern New Jersey, so I cover New Jersey, kind of northeastern Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, and then Connecticut, and sometimes New York City. So we have a colleague in New York City as well. So Amy, why don't you tell them?
And I'm in Western New York. I'm in Buffalo. My geography is the rest of New York State. So I cover all of New York State for any data need. And then I tend to, yes, and I tend to assist a lot of my colleagues throughout the country with education needs, with education data. And yes, there's someone covering every area. throughout the country. We've got colleagues who are assigned to any different states or regions, more than one state, depending on where they are. So there's a DDS assigned to everyone in every region. As far as in-person visits are concerned, it's a little bit tricky because we're sort of restricted into the what's the word I'm looking for here? The space radius in which we're allowed to travel from our home
Yeah.
base. So it depends on where you are, from where you are to where the DDS that's in your coverage area is,
Yeah.
as far as in-person is concerned. But we can do, any one of us can do virtual for anywhere. So if your DDS for your region is not either comfortable with what you're asking them to do, but we can do your virtual presentation if that's okay with you, or if you would prefer, or if someone is maybe a state over, like I'm right on the border sort of Pennsylvania. And so if, my colleague in Pennsylvania were too far for that 49-mile radius, but I am not, I could go to Pennsylvania, then, that could be an option as well. So we really collaborate and work well together to make sure you get what you need from us.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. So things change. I mean, the other thing I should say is myself, but I think you also, we kind of target these emails at a certain time of the year, right? Like at the beginning of a semester, if we can figure out when that is. Like some universities go by quarters or trimesters, but usually we try the beginning of a semester to send out emails. But hey, we're around all the time.
We are.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So I think I don't see any other questions. So let me just make
Nope,
sure.
right.
Oh, uh, oh yeah. Yes, is there someone covering every area for, well, hopefully, yeah. 49-mile radius. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, our
Um,
time is about up if no one has any other questions.
yeah.
We really appreciate you all being here and sticking around for this hour. Please do not hesitate to reach out. There's our email addresses and our phone numbers anytime. Ask questions, and we're here. We're here to help.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll just hold on for another minute or two in case there's any last questions. And we're good. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
So,
Thanks for coming,
yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.